Okay, so various local gangs with ties to different national cartels control different areas of Mexico City. This video is going to focus on the organization which, for about the last 10 years, has controlled the central part of the city, La Union de Tepito. This gang controls all of the main touristic areas of the city other than maybe Coyoacan and the campus of UNAM. The Union has a particularly strong hold on the Centro Histórico, which is usually the first stop for tourists visiting Mexico City. Tepito, just blocks north of the touristic Centro Histórico, is a really famous place, and there's a lot of good information about it in English. You can find YouTube videos about its markets, its food, like the soup called migas, um, the fact that it's been a market area since pre-Hispanic times, the shrine to Santa Muerte. Tepito is also the nerve center of organized crime in the central neighborhoods of the city. Before the Union was formed a decade ago, drug dealing in bars in central and touristic areas, such as the Centro Histórico, the Zona Rosa, Condesa, Roma, and around Insurgentes, were controlled by a number of families based out of Tepito. Some of those families were brought together and formed what is now known as the Union of Tepito. This union has brought a heightened level of violence to Mexico City as it has waged war with its competition and extorted small business owners operating within its territories. If we follow the roots of this organization, we wind up in Laredo, Texas, in the US. Edgar Valdez Villarreal, known as La Barbie, has one of the strangest backstories of any of the kind of well-known narcos. A high school football player from a middle-class family in Laredo, he was charged on marijuana distribution charges or indicted on distribution charges in the late 90s, and he fled across the border. And then once in Mexico, he started to rise in the ranks of the Beltran-Leyva cartel. And he wound up heading a large group of enforcers known as Los Negros. In the early 2000s, he was moving marijuana north and cash south via tractor trailers at the Laredo, Texas border crossing. And then he was able to establish a cocaine trafficking route from Colombia via Central America. A lot of people consider him responsible for bringing violence deeper south into Mexico than it had previously been. He wrestled control of Acapulco from Los Zetas, and some blame him for bringing more extreme tactics, such as the use of videotaped decapitations, to the Mexican narco conflict. When Arturo Beltran-Leyva was killed in a shootout with about 200 Mexican Marines in Cuernavaca in 2009, La Barbie entered into a power struggle with the fractured Beltran-Leyva cartel. The brutal operation in which Arturo Beltran-Leyva was killed was a really significant event in the Mexican drug war. Until that point, people in Mexico City and the cities around in central Mexico, like Cuernavaca, felt kind of insulated from the violence that had been getting really extreme in the north of the country. So what happened in Cuernavaca kind of shattered that sense of insulation from the drug war. The event is also really significant because of the part played by the Mexican Marines. They're an elite force in the country, and this is kind of when they started being utilized in this really bloody war. As cartel warfare increased, La Barbie found himself in a changed organization, and he was having trouble moving drugs north. He was able to get them from the south, though. So he looked to Mexico City as a potential market for his product. And then he actually calls for a meeting in Tepito. And La Barbie was one of the most wanted drug kingpins in Mexico, one of the most wanted men in Mexico when he entered into the barrio of Tepito, right in the central heart of Mexico City. He entered with, it said, 100 gunmen in black baseball caps who didn't speak. They communicated with hand signals and with military precision surrounded the location of this meeting that he set up. Police around reported on seeing really suspicious activity, like 100 gunmen moving like an army, and they were told to stand down by the superiors. The meeting took place for 6 hours and is said to have had 20 participants. Present was Ricardo Lopez Castillo, known as El Moco. El Moco was a former police officer of the Federal Judicial Police, the PJF, which was shut down in 2002 because of the out-of-control institutional corruption within its ranks. El Moco had begun his career in the PJF in northern Mexico, and so he knew La Barbie from Nuevo Laredo on the Mexican side. And then he later moved to Mexico City and started facilitating negotiations between Los Zetas and some of the Tepito-based crime families. Also present at this meeting in Tepito were the brothers Hernandez Gomez, who had controlled the drug trade in some nightlife areas near the Centro. And these brothers, for years to come, would be commonly referred to in Mexican newspapers as the leaders of La Union de Tepito. Representatives of other families controlling various areas were also present at the meeting. The purpose of the meeting was to unite the crime families of Tepito together into a federation. An agreement was made that La Barbie would sell them cocaine and methamphetamines at a more reasonable price than they had been getting before. And he would also share his protection from the Mexican Attorney General's office, the PGR, or corrupt elements of the PGR, and the federal police also. A few months later, La Barbie was arrested in the state of Mexico, but the union which he helped form remains a powerful organization until today. For a time, La Barbie was able to give orders to the union from behind bars with the authority of the Beltran-Leyva organization. One order he gave was for the union to fight their rivals for control of more territory in the city. And so the violence in Mexico City escalated. A phenomenon that had not been previously seen in Mexico City started to happen, and that's the Cobra de Piso, which is basically a protection racket like those practiced by the Italian mafia. Small business owners in Mexico City were beginning to be required to pay criminal gangs that controlled the streets where they were located. This still occurs in Mexico City, particularly in the Centro Histórico. The Cobra de Piso system now also applies to various lines of the Mexico City subway, the Metro. Those that sell goods on the trains are required to pay criminal organizations for the right to do their work. There are videos on social media showing Metro vendors being brutally beaten in train stations. These public beatings are a warning to others. The owners of small businesses often tell the same story. They open up shop one morning and find an envelope slipped into their store. Inside the envelope are instructions on paying the Cobra de Piso and also pictures of their family members, often of their children or their grandchildren walking to school. The most shocking result of the rise of the union has been the vendettas, the assassinations committed between rival gangs. Tourist locations are not off limits in the battle for territory. In September 2018, days before the Mexican Independence Day, Plaza Garibaldi was the scene of an event that made headlines around the world. Plaza Garibaldi, a true tourist zone, is the center of mariachi music in Mexico City, where one can listen to live mariachis day and night. The plaza is ringed with bars and nightclubs and is typically well visited by international and especially Mexican tourists. It is located roughly between Mexico City's opulent Palacio de Bellas Artes and the barrio of Tepito. Late at night on Friday, September 14th, 2018, The plaza was busy with tourists enjoying drinks and the music from the dozens of mariachi groups that roamed the area, playing Mexican classics for tips. The night turned sour when three sicarios for the Union Tepito, dressed in full mariachi costumes, pulled from their instrument cases AR-15 rifles and 9mm pistols and fired around 70 shots at a cluster of tables outside of a cheleria, a beer bar. Security camera footage from the plaza shows the terrified crowd running from the gunshots. Footage from the street outside the plaza shows the three gunmen running to waiting motorcycles, and the motorcycles riding away with the three drivers up front and the sicarios in mariachi suits on the back. Reports at the time said the shooting left 5 dead and 9 wounded, including 2 foreigners. Who were the Union sicarios trying to hit in Plaza Garibaldi that night? The short answer is members of a rival group, the Anti-Union. Specifically, the leader of La Anti-Union, nicknamed El Tortas, who is said to have narrowly escaped. But that's a story for another video. I'm going to leave this story here and talk a little bit about this channel. In Mexico, there are books, newspapers, tabloids, TV, and radio programs that cover crime and criminal gangs. The most discussed criminal organization of recent years has been the Union. I recently searched on YouTube and I found that there are no videos or news clips in English that discuss the Union of Tepito. I know there are a lot of non-Spanish speaking tourists, expats, digital nomads who live in or visit Mexico, and I think there's a lack of information that explores crime in Mexico City specifically. The majority of the information I presented in this video about the Union was lifted from one source, a really great book called Narco CDMX, authored by Sandra Romandìa, David Fuentes, and Antonio Nieto. The book was released in 2019. There's no English translation of the book available now, and I don't know if there will be plans for it to be released in English. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, 99 journalists have been murdered since Mexican President Felipe Calderón launched the so-called Mexican drug war in 2006. Other tallies of journalists murdered since then run higher. Mexican journalists put themselves in grave danger to produce their work, and I think that it's a shame that more of the information they uncover isn't available in English. With this channel, I'm attempting to bring a little bit more of this information to English-speaking audiences. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to receive more videos about crime in and around Mexico City.